Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Dan Lynch joins me. We're going to talk about The Maker, a way to make your websites a whole lot easier. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Dan Lynch. Episode 254, recorded June 5th, 2013. The Maker. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you as often as I can the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the little projects, projects you might not have heard of, projects you may be using every day. Joining me today again is Dan Lynch, my co-host. Welcome back, Dan.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So this is like 2 weeks in a row we're hanging out together. It's very appropriate. Very cool.
Yeah,
and,
2 weeks in a row. That's true.
Yeah. And who knows how many more weeks? Depends on what's coming up, I guess, and who else I can get for co-hosts as well. I like to have a rotating panel of co-hosts. I guess we didn't rotate it very far between last week and this week. But that's great.
No, that's true. That's true.
Welcome back. Well, we have a really interesting guest today. We have not just guests, plural. We have two guys from the Maker, not Maker CMS, it's The Maker project. That's Gerald Spreer and Ian Barrow. And The Maker is looks like it's a IDE of some kind, a text editor of some kind, to help you build websites. So you go into these, when I build a complex website, you go in and you edit your HTML in there, and then you push publish, and it knows how to actually ship the stuff up to the server automatically for you, and it has little preview windows, and it's got good templates so you can bring in, like, for example, Twitter Bootstrap right away and so on. So I've been looking at this. I didn't have much time to play with it, so hopefully I'll have a chance. Well, I won't have a chance now since the show's already on, so I guess I won't be playing much with it. Did any of you looked into this? I think you were playing with like the Linux version, weren't you?
Yeah, there's not an official Linux version, but thanks to Gerald, he actually sent me some emails yesterday and talked me through getting this installed, and we'll have a chat about that. It was really easy and it works great. Yeah, it's a bit of a cross between an IDE and a CMS, I suppose. Interesting project. Yeah, definitely cool. So let's see, is there anything else in my notes I have to talk about before the beginning of the show? No, that's it. So let's go ahead and bring on our guests. Let's start with Gerald Spreer. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Oh, good. So sort of halfway between me and Dan. Sort of, well, I don't, depending on how you do the numbers, I guess. maybe not. Okay.
Sort of.
Okay, I gave sort of let's go ahead and bring on Ian Barrow as well. Ian, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking from Warrington in England, which I guess is just a stone throw from where Dan is.
It's very close, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you guys could have actually gotten together on the same camera then, maybe. No, just kidding. No, it's much better this way. Much better this way. Okay, no problem. So let's go back to Gerald for a second. I gave a sort of an overview, at least the best I can understand it, of what Maker CMS is about. But why don't you go ahead and give us the 30,000-foot view and what problem it solves?
Well, the Maker is an application that lets you very quickly create websites, and once you created them, you can also manage them in the future with the Maker. So it is sort of like a CMS, but since the Maker got started in 2005, the whole CMS industry has evolved a lot, and so people might misconfuse that name for something else. So it runs on your local machine, and it gives you all the tools that you will need to create a website and to manage it from there on.
So I know you've got CMS as part of the title, but we have actually had questions in the chat room already. Isn't this more just an IDE?
Yes, it maybe is a marriage between an IDE and a CMS, because the Maker is not just merely a text editor with built-in FTP, but it does manage a lot of the website's details behind the back. For example, your links, your images. You have the option to create dynamic content and stuff like that. So it gives you a lot more control than just, a text editor where you open a file and you edit it, and you open a FTP client and you upload your file. It is a lot more control than that.
That's interesting. So how does it manage the links? So, I mean, I can have like a link in one of my HTML files that points to another one, and then if I rename that one, it renames this one automatically, or something else like that?
Yes, that's how it works. If you have internal links in your Maker project, you just link to a file. Let's say you have a project and you have an About page. You'll just link to your About page. And you have something in the Maker that's called the distribution table. And there you edit the About page's location on the server. So that way you can also have very nice URLs. For example, my website /about/. And you have full control over that. So then when you decide to move this About page somewhere else, you edit the distribution table, move your page, and then internally the Maker does it all for you.
I also seem to see some things in there about like assembling pages, like assembling headers and footers that are across a common boundary. So there's sort of a templating system in there?
Yeah, the Maker breaks all the pages apart into their parts. For example, you have the header where all the metadata is stored. That's called .head. And then you have a navigation and a body part. And then there comes the actual content part and the footer of the page. Because most pages are built that way, and many years after I had implemented this in the Maker, I found that other people sort of gotten the same idea, like WordPress. WordPress does the same thing. Rails does the same with, what are they called? Never mind. So there are similar structures in other systems that basically break pages apart. And in the Maker, that's actually what's happening. So when you edit a page, you only see the content in the editor. Because, why would you want to look at an HTML file's header all the time?
True,
so
yes.
You just edit pages content, that thing that's actually visible in the browser, and then you move on. And when you want to edit the header, you just open the header file, you edit it, and then the Maker will rebuild or make these pages across the project. So that's where actually the name comes from. It has no religious background.
Okay, yeah, I know somebody brought that up at the channel earlier. That was sort of hilarious. Now, when you're saying editing these pages, I actually played with this a little bit yesterday, so I had a little bit of chance to get my hands around it. So it looks like there's an interface here where we have like a big pane on the right-hand side, which is where I type my HTML and my CSS into, and then you have down the left-hand side the standard sort of tree explorer thing to pull things out. So do I have to use the Maker's built-in editor, or can I use, like, I'm much more familiar with Emacs. Can I use that instead?
You could, theoretically, and
okay.
It would beat it would defeat the purpose of the Maker, though. But if you want to do that, you can just drill down into your project bundle, edit the file with Emacs, and then have the Maker open at the same time, and you just hit make all or preview and upload and these things, and the Maker will do it. Yes, it's all very transparent and open. It's all plain text. You can just drill down into that project bundle and do your own stuff. Ian is very good at doing unexpected things and making them work.
Great. I also want to get a little bit of the history of the project. When did this get started, and what was the motivation for it?
I moved to the US in 2003 to work with a nonprofit organization here in Austin. And the funds were very low at that time. And also, this is 2003. So at that time, it was very expensive to get hosting with PHP support or, even Apache, all these LAMP stacks and all these things. And we quickly found, and they put me in charge of the website and the infrastructure of the IT at this nonprofit, because I was the only guy with computing background. And so I quickly realized, because we are a social organization, we spend a lot of time doing street work, that I will need some tool to help me manage this website because it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and I didn't have the time. So I looked at CMSs, and many of them were out of our option because we didn't have the hosting capabilities for all these databases and stuff. And then I had the idea of just creating the Maker, having a tool that will just help me build these websites really quickly, and especially repeating parts like a navigation. Let's say you have a website with 50 pages, and then and it's all just plain HTML, and you want to change the navigation. You have to do this 50 times. And that's how actually the Maker got started. I built these parts and a shell script that would put them together and FTP them, and then it evolved from there. So the Maker actually started in a bash shell in 2003.
Cool. And you keep saying FTP. Are you talking about SFTP, or are you actually using plain text FTP these days?
We are still using plain text FTP.
Over the live internet? No. You should know better than to do that.
The reason for this is because we are actually essentially a cross-platform project, and we wanted to help people to get the Maker started really quick. So for a long time, our only dependency was WX Python. And to do SFTP, there would have been more dependencies. Now this game has changed a little bit. Since we have more dependencies anyways, we will offer SFTP support pretty soon, because it's, there are, I think, 3 or 4 dependencies already, and that one thing for SFTP will not make a big difference.
Cool. And that was the voice of Ian there. Ian, I want to get you brought in on the conversation. How did you get involved with the Maker?
Okay. It goes back quite a long time too. Perhaps not quite back to the beginnings of the Maker, but I started looking at web development platforms around 2005 and late 2005, and I used Dreamweaver for a while and didn't really get on very well with it. So I dropped that, and in 2007 I discovered the Maker and downloaded it and tried it. It worked pretty well, but as soon as I tried to connect to my web host, I had a few difficulties. So I contacted Gerald, and he got straight back to me. So I was amazed with the response I got. I was not really aware of this sort of behavior in the open source world. So this was really great. And we worked out a solution, and we patched the Maker, and it worked with more varied web hosts, and certainly worked with mine. And from then on, Gerald started to send me patches, and I would test them. And eventually he gave me the access to the repository, so we could share the source, both using Eclipse to do some work on that. And I was running a G3 iMac, Mac OS X Panther at the time, so I was able to do the builds on the Mac and do the testing on the Mac, and also a little bit of testing on Linux and PC. So it gave us, between us, we started to get a little bit more testing done and start to do a little bit of development across the different platforms. So that was my beginnings, and I started to fix a few websites for people that had asked me to do this work in the first place. And from then, we discovered kind of little nuances in doing this type of work, which caused us to make changes to the Maker, which have made it overall a very, very rapid device for this sort of work.
So what am I seeing when I'm actually, I described it already. I can't ask you what I see. I saw it already, but what's the typical workflow for this? I didn't get into it enough to actually build out a real small website. So how would you approach using the Maker to rapidly prototype and develop a website?
Okay, well, first off, you just open up the Maker and give your project a name, and then choose a template. At the moment, we've got 4 templates using industry standard, real good quality templating frameworks in there. choose one of those, and then just start editing. Once you've got that framework in place, it would give you at least one index page, so you'd get some immediate feedback of what the page would look like, and then you can just add pages and add to your navigation as you want to go along. And as Gerald says, it's when you create a new page, you're just really creating the .content in, as you say, the template of the maker. But there's nothing to stop you from restructuring that and having a different template arrangement, if you like. We have some features in the maker called dynamics, which certainly enables you to reshape the templating in any fashion that you want. And with the addition of more and more templates, if you take one of these modern templates from the web, like Initializer, you can quickly configure that to work with the maker and set up the files accordingly. Once that's there and you have the CSS and the JavaScript in place, really you're just creating new pages. You can preview them in pressing the preview button. When you're happy with those changes that you've done, you just press publish and they're up on your web host.
Cool. One little thing I noticed is that preview doesn't have a command key.
Okay.
I was going, that should be on a key, because if you're typing in the editor, you just want to hit a key, not have to move the mouse around. So just feedback.
It is actually F5. But that might not work.
Okay, I didn't see that there.
Let's blame that on the WX people.
Okay.
Indeed.
We should put that on the list straight away anyway.
Okay, all right.
But this is the whole point, because we've been using it so much ourselves in real life environments, then it's not really been a case of working around problems that we've come across. It's been a case of making them disappear and making the path as smooth as possible. So it is really quick to take an existing site or create a new site and then manage it and make changes through the maker.
So, that's sort of an interesting question. So if I already have an existing site, I'm actually thinking of my client's site, insightcruises.com. He has hundreds and hundreds of web pages, and there's a lot of common content in there that I think we could probably factor out into something using the maker. But how hard would it be to reverse engineer that direction?
Well, I guess, there'd be kind of two approaches. You could either do it by hand, and you'd have to recreate the .content yourself, or you'd write some code. We'd probably write some Python. You might write some Perl, and sure. We'd kind of just pass it through to the. I mean, there are only text files in the maker projects anyway.
Okay.
So we've done things like that. That works well.
Cool. Exactly. So one of the things I did notice as I was playing around with it for the very limited time I had to play with this, is that one of your templates is Bootstrap with jQuery. I think that's a pretty good choice these days. How did you choose the 4 templates that you have now?
We really just looked around at what was available and wanted a good cross section. I mean, Bootstrap is very popular. It's got a lot of power. So we thought it was essential that we included that one. But, we'd also used HTML Kickstart from 99 Lime, and that's a really nice framework too. So we included that. We wanted something simpler. We have Markdown built into the Maker internals, so you can use Markdown. So we picked a nice, simple Markdown CSS template, and we included that. And then finally, we found this one called Skeleton, and we tested that for a while, and that seems to fit with in between the other 2 fairly complex ones. So we included that. But we've got some others as well, which we're testing at the moment, and we're not quite sure how we're going to embed them and present them in the template chooser within the Maker, but we'll certainly start to build them in there somehow.
Sounds excellent. And I've got a question about support for this on different platforms. I've had some nice email exchanges with Gerald about this, about getting to work on Linux. We mentioned at the top of the show that this is kind of predominantly a Mac project, really. It works well on the Mac. That's what it's targeted for. But you can get working on Linux. So what kind of platforms can I run this on? And are there plans to expand that at all?
Well, originally the Maker was cross-platform from day one because it was, the source was available, and it was Python and WX Python to run there were the only dependencies that you would need. So up until the beginning of this year, all platforms were treated equally in that respect, and that's if it ran on Linux, it would run on Windows, it would run on Mac. We could produce binaries for the Mac, and we could produce binaries for Windows, but it was always run from source. But that was not really a problem for the Linux guys. They kind of got with that pretty easily. So that will always continue. But recently, since January this year, when we put some of the emphasis on the Mac platform, we've had to do some changes to the visual representation and also the way that the Maker works, so that we could actually get it onto the Mac App Store. And in doing that, we've gone through a few revision changes. But essentially, the version that you're using, Dan, 1.5 or 1.51, is functionally the same as what we're using now. It's the same as what Randall has, that Randall's quickly tried. The main difference is some visual differences to kind of suit the Mac platform more. So there's a little bit more eye candy for the Mac, and the template chooser is a little bit more glamorous. Some of this is dependent upon the version of WX, and Gerald's done an awful lot of work under the skin, and some work on WX to get the Maker to work the way it is doing now on the Mac. Maybe it might be worth you talking a little about that, Gerald.
Well, yeah.
The App Store issues.
Yes. So the thing was, Apple has introduced this sandboxing requirement on the App Store, that all the apps run in a sandbox environment where you're basically closed off from the rest of the system. And in the documentation, they'll just say, okay, so you use this Objective-C code and you paste it in and it works. But we're in Python. And so getting this on the store was sort of like a small miracle in itself. I had to do a small patch in WX to make this work, because the sandbox in OS 10 actually breaks the object inheritance chain. So there's a few methods that you cannot use anymore. It will just crash your application. So we had to address that and got it working from there, and that went all pretty nice. That's the glory of open source. You just download the source, you make a change, you recompile, and you're good to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think we all agree with that. The glory of open source. Yeah. I was going to ask, actually, it's a good time to ask you, Gerald, why you chose Python for this. I mean, you mentioned it started in a bash shell, basically, back in 2003. At what point did it become more than that, and why did you decide that Python was the way to go?
When I started the Maker, I was managing two websites. My personal website, which I had on my Linux box at home, and this nonprofit's website, which was a XP machine back in the day. So I needed something that was cross-platform. And the Maker started at home in Bash, and then I tried to port it, make it work in the office, and I quickly found that I need a different solution for that, because I needed a cross-platform solution. And then I thought it would be nice to have something, visual with a GUI and with my own editor. And so I tried Java for about 2 weeks, and was not very happy with that for some reason. I don't know, maybe it was just too stupid at the time. And then I came across Python by just browsing the web. And I think it was like Eric Raymond saying, okay, if you want to be a hacker, learn to program and maybe choose Python for that. I think that's how I checked it out. And then I saw that in Python, you have tkinter built in. Just, with a few lines of code, you can have a window up on your screen and dialogues. So I wrote a version in Python, which was using the TK toolkit. and it was running on Windows and Linux, and I didn't have a Mac at that time. And few years later, I switched to WX Python, and that was basically in 2005 when the project got released for the first time, and it's been open source ever since.
And you mentioned about the different toolkits and stuff on like TK, the one that comes with Python built in. Obviously, you're using WX widgets, which I've used a bit myself with Python and some other things. But there are a few different kind of cross-platform, well, there are lots actually, of cross-platform toolkits. So what was it about WX widgets that kind of made you think this is the one we want for our system?
I better don't tell.
Oh, okay.
No, actually, I got started with, this was still, when nobody knew about the Maker, and I was just playing around. And I've always liked splash screens. I just love them. And in WX, you had this function call where you just can create a splash screen very easily. And that's why I choose WX. But that being said, WX has been an excellent choice because of the styled text control that we use for our editor, which is based on Scintilla, which is great. It's just really, even at times when I thought of rewriting the Maker in something else, I thought I would just miss that component so much, and there would be so much work to get it back to the stage where it is now. So WX has definitely been a good choice. It's very stable. It's a great community, and it's well supported. And especially also in comparison to TK, it looks native wherever you run it. Or either it's on Linux or Windows or on the Mac. It just looks like a native application for that platform, and that gives the user more confidence. Instead of having something that looks weird and off. Yeah.
And I was going to mention that actually, because I know a lot of people like WX widgets because of the way they look, basically, and they can look really good across all platforms. I think VLC uses WX for a lot of its UI for that reason. Yeah, which is probably why I thought they would do that. Okay, then. So I mentioned last week on the show that I'm a bit of a licensing geek, and I noticed to my delight that you've got the GPL v3 as your license for this project, which I'll hold up my hands as biased towards that before I start gushing about it. But I was just curious why you chose GPL v3, because that's a relatively new license as well. So did you move from an older license like GPL v2 to v3, and what was the thinking behind that kind of thing?
We moved from the MIT license to GPL v3. Just because I always wanted this code to be open source, and just wanted to make sure that nobody's at some point going to take parts of it and turn it into like a proprietary product. That being said as well, I'm not sure if I want to go through the hassle of going to court and, in lawsuits and stuff, but, be aware, it is GPL, so I might. But it was really making sure that this stays open source because that's something that's very important to me. I've been able to do so much great work due to open source software, and actually in our organization we are all open source. We don't have a single MS Office install or anything, and that's just been great.
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually on the choice of license. So it's really the copyleft side of it that you're into. So I'm sure everybody listening to this show will be more than up to scratch with all the different licenses. But basically under the GPL, well, both versions, in fact, it means that you can enforce sharing of the code, basically, which doesn't happen all that often, but there have been some cases of that. I'm curious about contributors as well. How do you deal with contributors and so on? Do you get them to sign off on the copyright and so on? Because that can be a big problem, intellectual property for a lot of projects. They have something like a contributor agreement. Do you guys have to worry about any of that kind of stuff?
Not at the moment. We had a third developer who was working on the Maker for a while, and has made great contribution to the project. And he just, we just have agreement. Like, he's not working with us anymore, but we have just this agreement that his code is contributed, and that's fine. That we had small contributions from other people, and they just they sent the patch, and with the patch a note saying, okay, I'm signing off all copyright and whatever. So it's good. And at this point, Ian and I, we are the only people working on that, and so that's not been an issue so far.
Okay, so you don't get, because you mentioned a small development team, so you don't have to worry with so much about thousands of patches coming in and stuff.
Right.
Is that something you'd consider in future? Would you consider opening up for patches and stuff? Do you accept patches? Would you be willing to?
Yes, and so the maker has been, we've been there for 7 years now, but it really feels like with all the recent developments that, targeting the Mac platform, getting it on the App Store, more quality stuff. No, not that it was bad before, but it's really given us a whole nother level of commitment to the project. And I feel, or we both feel, that we are just getting started. So we are open for comments, and if people just want to contact us, we're not getting, slammed with email right now. So we are open to suggestions, patches, and whatever. Although, be aware this code might not be as brilliant as you're used to.
Right. And jumping back a little bit, I mentioned before about Linux support and other platforms and so on. And I was going to ask you I haven't been able to find any packages, any distribution packages for, Ubuntu or any other things. But then, to be honest, having installed this myself, it's actually really easy to do on Linux. So I don't really see how many people would have much of a problem. I basically installed Python Markdown 2 from pip, right. From the Python pip. I just did that, nice and easy. And I think I grabbed a package out of the repositories. I'm on Linux Mint 14. I grabbed whatever it was out of I think it was WX, WX Python. And that was it, and it just worked. So it seems like the strategy is working really well for you of keeping the cross-platform thing going, because there's really only, I think, 2 dependencies.
Right.
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay then. So what's I was curious about maybe support for I don't know. Are you thinking about obviously you say it runs on Windows and other things. Is there any plans to try and get it into other app stores or repositories or things? Because I know Microsoft are coming up with some kind of app store model, and obviously we've got repositories in all different Linux distributions. Any plans to look at that kind of thing as well?
I've been looking at it this morning, and it didn't make much sense really, but just because I didn't have the time really to look into this. But we definitely want to support Linux and Windows in the future to some degree. We'll really just have to see where this road will lead us now that we are, on the Mac, and we really focused on the user experience on the Mac. And so it is basically, the Maker has been forked sort of by the beginning of this year, but it's not really a fork, it's more like a branch or whatever. Maybe there's not really a word for it. But we will definitely move many of the changes that are in the Mac version now back into the Linux and Windows. My problem is that I don't actually have a Windows machine right now, so I cannot do much testing or development, but we'll definitely look into that in the future.
Excellent. And what's the kind of community like that's using this? You mentioned as a kind of a small development team. Do you have a community out there, people, forums and so on, people using this and giving you feedback and telling you what they like or don't like about this kind of thing?
Not very much. we found that people they have been using the Maker and have been stuck with it in a positive way. Like, we have people, they've been using it since the TK version and still do. But we don't hear a lot of feedback. Also, from since we've been on the App Store, there has not been much feedback, and I guess that's positive because it works, and it just says, like Ian says, it does what it says on the tin. So, but we don't have a huge community at this point with forums and stuff, and we're not doing this full time. Most of the code that's in the 1.8 version has been written between 3 and 6 a.m. And so, we are very limited, actually, time-wise in what we can do and what we can pull off. But we will see where this path will lead us, and we're doing good so far.
Yeah, and if I can direct a question to Ian for a second, because I know I don't you think we've been ignoring you there, especially as we're so close. I don't want to get like a slap on the back of the head or something. Yeah, okay, I can hear you through the wall. Yeah, so I was curious. I mean, you guys aren't developing this full time, so what's the kind of model there? Is this a labour of love, or is there some kind of commercial model, or is there maybe a plan for a potential commercial model in future?
Well, it's on the Mac App Store, and there's a value to it there. As Gerald says, we want to maintain the open source essence of the Maker, so we will continue to, promote the Linux and the Windows versions as well. But between us, it's just our kind of time and effort, and we do love working on the Maker, and we love using the Maker. We maintain through some other software, through Basecamp, some lists of ideas we want to implement of the bug lists. If we get any feedback, we keep that in a separate list as well. And every day, we update that list, and every day we're crossing items off. So there's continuous work on this to more or less a degree. And although it isn't a full-time job, and myself and Gerald are not spending 8 hours a day working on it, because we have been working over such a long time. It is pretty well polished and bug-free. So there's always room for improvement, and certainly as we find new areas we want to move into, then we make changes as well. But it is a part-time activity. We do enjoy doing it, and we think it's fairly solid the way it is now. But we think there's still room for improvement.
Mm-hmm. What's your development process like? Do you have unit tests for this? Do you have ways of poking at the final UI to see if it's responding properly, or is it all just sort of manually done these days?
Well, historically it's all been manually done. But anything new that we write is built with unit tests. So we've kind of learned things over the years. So where we can, any new modules that go into the Maker, we try to build test suites accordingly. And that's worked pretty well, I think. In fact, we kind of picked this up off other FLOSS weeklies, the one on TDD. So, that's kind of when we first started looking at that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So, and that was, that was quite an eye-opener. And we worked on some other projects, some shorter-term projects, and just Gerald employed TDD on them completely successfully. So that's the way we're moving with the testing now as we're going forward. But we do have kind of a manual set of tests that we do when we do a release to make sure that the user interface and the user interaction is going to stay good. The underlying code has been pretty severely tested in the past, so it's the top-level changes that we make now that we want to make sure are good.
And I'm not too familiar with this, but are there end user testing suites for Cocoa? I mean, can you actually get all the way up to seeing what the widget's actually displaying and making sure it's correct?
I'm not sure about this, actually. I think it seems like there's a lot of progress in WX widgets right now. They've moved actually away from Carbon recently and onto Cocoa. There's this change, like the classic WX is 2.8. X, and then the new one is 2.9. They're at 2.94 now. 2.95 will come out soon, and they are building in things where you can simulate UI interaction, and I think that's what that's for, and that will be very useful for unit tests, because I would say traditionally it's very hard to test just a GUI interface, because you have this main loop and that's it. But with these tools that they provide in the new WX, we will get this to work as well. So we are very much above the Cocoa level. It's all Python and WX Python, and we write some PyOpC code to address some issues that we had with the sandbox. But in the end, it's all in the Python level.
Cool. And how, you said you made a couple changes to WX to get it to work. Has that been incorporated upstream yet?
I made a change myself to get it to work, and I submitted a bug report, and they fixed it. And so if you download the current source from WX, like the development source, it will be fixed, and it will be in the new release.
That's awesome.
But
sorry.
let me say that I didn't patch the code really. I just made it work for me. I sent them the code that works for me, and they patched it properly.
Ah, even better. So you inspired them to do it the right way. Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm not that much of an Objective-C programmer.
Great. So, what's your release schedule like? Do you have another upcoming release soon? Do you have regular releases, or do you just release it when you got some new features you've had time to work on?
We sort of, do it like John Carmack. It's done when it's done.
Okay.
But we are on 1.8 now, which came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we'll have. Then now that it's out in the open and out in the wild, we'll get some feedback and things that need to be fixed. So there will be another release within a month or 2 months. But pretty much we really try to have like a 4, 5, 6 month release schedule. But if there's nothing to do, there's nothing to do. We don't just work on it for the sake of it. And in my workday, I use the Maker about 80% of my work time I'm spending in the Maker. So if I feel the need for an improvement, it will definitely go in there.
Awesome. And I don't know how much you can tell us about this, but what's it like working with the Mac Store?
It's been a good experience. Of course, you have to pay to get on, and then you have to sort of make sure that you get this back somehow. If you don't want to spend, all your money every year just to be there.
Yeah.
And then basically you build, like what the process is, like we write this all in Python and WX Python, and we use Py2app to build the executable. And we send it to application loader, which is your way of putting it onto the store. Then it will pass initial checks. If something fails with the code signing, they'll let you know on your machine still.
Wow.
And then you might get past that stage, and then you still get an email saying there's something wrong with your code. Please fix it. And then, of course, you have to figure out what that means in your Python code. And then you wait about a week for them to review the app, and then it's either approved or denied. And we've been rejected. That's actually a stronger word here, rejected. Then get an email. Your app has been rejected, and they explain what's wrong. And I actually then you have in the App Store you have like 2 technical support tickets available per year. And I contacted the Apple support, and they've been very helpful. They give me the information that I needed, was very professional. And then it's just up to you to re-implement the changes and resubmit, and then you have to wait another week. So it teaches you patience, but it's been a pleasant experience so far.
Cool. And by setting the price, can you change that price like daily or weekly, or is that's locked in when you submit the app?
No, you can change the price how often you want. Like you change it, then it takes about half an hour to update on the store, and then you can change it back.
Ah, so that's why I see so many things that go through these daily sales that bring stuff down. I'm following not Mac apps, but I'm following a lot of iOS apps, and there's like 2 or 3 RSS feeds that let me know when something has dropped down to free for a while. So I have way more apps than I need. Because every day that something goes free, I just get it, and then I've got like 5 screens of apps on my phone that I haven't even invoked yet because I don't have time to go through them all. Crazy stuff. Crazy.
And being on the App Store is great because it gives people such a convenient way to just get the application. They'll have free updates, in the future. It all goes very smooth. If you don't like it, which we don't hope, you can actually go through Apple and get a refund. So that takes all those worries away from you.
That is very cool, and I have to ask you one of my obligatory Python questions. I always do this every time we get a project on. It's got something to do with Python. So I'm going to ask about Python 3. You probably guessed I might ask about that.
Yes.
I use 2.7. I think I pulled down, or that was the version I had on here, and that was fine. I think it's 2.6 or later that you support. Have you looked at Python 3? Any plans to support it? Anything in there that you might like to kind of use in the future? You think?
Honestly, I have not looked at Python 3 ever. I've heard about it and I've followed the development, what's going on, sort of, but I have not tried it yet. And the reason for it being, never change a running system. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we are fine with 2.7. It's really fast. Actually, we've run tests on Ubuntu yesterday, and this is just blazing fast. And so there's really, all these global interpreter lock issues. Maybe it's naive to say they don't apply to us, but we have not had any issues so far that would lead us to use Python 3.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I know it's a big change for a lot of projects. They've chosen to break some backwards compatibility as well. So I think it's. I mean, I'm speaking out of turn here because I've not actually tried to move a project from 2.x to 3, but I suspect you'd probably need to change a fair amount of stuff, or certainly, quite not an insignificant amount of stuff. Okay, then. So, Ian, I'm going to ask you my other favorite Python question, which I've mentioned so many times on this show. Every time we get some Python people on, I ask about PyPy and whether people have looked at it. And people asking last week how you spell PyPy, because there's the Python package initiative or whatever it's called, but that's PYPI. I'm talking about PyPy, which is PYPY. Have you looked at PyPy? Because the speed it can give you and stuff, you had to play with it at all?
No, I have looked at PyPy. We've never tried to move any parts of the maker or the whole maker to PyPy. As Gerald mentions, we don't really feel like we've got a speed problem where we would need to consider something like that, but it certainly looks a very exciting way of going for people that want to get higher performance out of something like Python. So yeah, it's something that we're aware of, and it would be nice to consider for perhaps a newer project if we were to start something new. But no, we're aware of PyPy, but it's not something that we've looked at or contemplated for the maker. We're really kind of blown away with the speed we're seeing on the Mac, and certainly when we tried on Ubuntu yesterday, it was incredibly fast. So even though we're probably only using one core of 4, it runs absolutely fine. So if we ever get into a situation where we perhaps need more performance, it may be easier to move to PyPy than 3, I think.
Awesome. So we're just about out of time, so I wanted to ask each of you a couple of final questions. Starting with you, Ian, is there anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure our audience is aware of? I think we've covered most things there. I did have a list of things to make sure that we covered. We talked about dynamics, and I know we picked up on that early on, but dynamics is a significant feature that if anyone does try the maker out, they should certainly delve into that and see how that works for them, because it can certainly, speed things up for you where you've got repeating parts of code. Okay, and my audience yelled at me last week for not asking my favorite 2 questions. I think I already know what one of the answers is. Your favorite scripting language?
Yeah, it's Python.
Okay,
sorry.
Right. And your favorite text editor?
Well, I do use Emacs every day, but really only use org mode.
Org mode, yes, we had them on the show. That's great.
Well,
cool.
Again, that was another education for me.
Oh, really? So you heard about org mode from FLOSS Weekly?
Yep.
Awesome. We're making a difference all the time. Yay. The projects you heard of, the projects you might not have heard of, the projects you might be using every day. Yes. That's why I say it's the beginning.
It's great. Yeah, it's great.
Very, very cool. And then over to you, Gerald. What is there anything we left out that you also want to make sure is covered?
Just been on the chat room quickly before the show, and there was this comment or like this question about dynamic content because in a CMS with the macro, because it gives you the basic tools, there's no limit in what you can do, but you're just doing it server side, basically. Like you can do PHP-driven database, whatever. It's all up to you. You know, you're not stuck with static pages. I've used the Maker to create database-driven websites. You know, what have you. It just integrates well. And another idea behind the Maker is really something that I see a lot in the nonprofit space. Is people use, you know, some CMS, or they try to use WordPress to build big sites, which it's not what it's actually designed for. But the time you spend learning a CMS, like Joomla, for example, or anything else, that's the time you actually can use to learn HTML and CSS. And that will give you the right tools. And with an application like the Maker, you will have a very powerful tool that you can apply this knowledge with, and will get you started really quick. And I think web development for many non-professionals has been overly complicated because they have this fear of, then I need to know HTML. You learn HTML in an hour, and you actually keep learning new stuff. And considering an application like the Maker will definitely make a big difference for a lot of people.
Cool. And also, I don't know if we actually got this explicitly. I know you talked about, you know, when I brought up SFTP, you said that's sort of in the future. Is there any more formal items on the roadmap forward that you're still working on that we should expect coming out soon?
SFTP support is definitely on the list. And then there's something I wanted to do for a long time, is that we want to have enabled them. Like right now, the Maker is built around projects, organizes your files in the projects and stuff, but you cannot use it as a general purpose text editor. That's not what it's intended for. But sometimes I find it frustrating while I am developing a software that's essentially a text editor, that I have to use something else to edit just a plain text file somewhere. So we will add support that you can just, you know, open any file with the Maker. It will be outside of a project, but that will give people a little more control also over external files.
That sounds great. I look forward to seeing that. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, the standard two questions. Again, I know the answer to the first one. Favorite scripting language?
Is Python.
Of course, yes. And the favorite text editor?
I use Emacs every day for org mode.
Wow.
And you found out about that where? Where did you find out?
Some show about open source. I don't remember. Like
some random show.
We both have been listening to this for many years.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for being fans of ours and audience members, and also now finally coming all the way around and being on the show. So I want to thank you both for actually spending some time today talking to us about the Maker, and hopefully if it fits the bill for people that want to have some sort of easy way to build websites, I'm sure they'll be downloading it or getting it from the Mac App Store.
Thank you for having us on.
Well, thank you, guys. That was Gerald Spreer and Ian Barrow. Probably mispronounced that. Barrow, one of those. Anyway, what'd you think there, Dan?
Yeah, really interesting project. I mean, I've been drawing a blank all the way through this. I was trying to think of a project. We had a guest project a little while ago that was slightly similar, but not quite the same, that tried to compile, it claimed to kind of compile websites from source and so on into finished websites. It seems an interesting way of going. I mean, so many sites are built the other way around now, but I like the fact that you can do dynamic stuff in this as well, because that was my big concerns before I actually looked at it. Was, oh, that's great, but what happens when I need to grab, a list of so many products from a database? How am I going to do that? So that's quite interesting that you can do dynamic stuff as well. I think that's a really good feature to have in there.
Well, it sounds like this is really driven. I like projects like this that are still small, that are driven by the actual people who are using them every day, as opposed to, say, a development team on one side of the aisle and then the actual users on the other side of the aisle, and they have to keep conversing and going back and forth. The downside of that, of course, is that as a programmer, I am a horrible visual artist. So the stuff I write always looks like junk, because it works really well. It's got lots of knobs and buttons and stuff and everything to make it all work, but it's always going to be a little bizarre in terms of the user interface. So I have to partner with people who have that all worked out. I'm also curious about. I should have asked this in the show, but it's over now. Whether someone who's like not a programmer, like more of a designer, could actually get into this. I'm thinking of some of the people who at work who really aren't programmers. They can do some little JavaScript stuff, but that's kind of the limits of their programming knowledge. I'm wondering if this is simple enough in terms of a UI. It sort of felt like it. It sort of felt like it was just pretty obvious. This goes here, this goes there. This is how you start a project. Here are the templates already put in place, and then you just press publish. So hopefully there's enough of that in here that even somebody who is not really a programmer can build their own website.
Yeah, it seems like a nice, clean interface to me. Very kind of simple to use. And I did kind of mention it on the show there, but I should point out as well that although they don't officially have a Linux version, it took me 5 minutes, less maybe, to get this working. On Linux, obviously I've got Python. I installed a couple of packages and bang, it works. So yeah, I think if you're on another platform like Linux, for example, give it a try as well. Make sure, or even, I haven't tried it on Windows, I'll confess, but give it a try and see how you get on.
And if you do have OS 10, the GitHub looks like it builds directly on OS 10, provided you have the 3 or 4 dependencies installed. So you can either get it through the Mac App Store and give them a little bit of money, or you can actually just build it yourself, because this is open source. So good for that, and good if you happen to have an OS 10 machine. Speaking of upcoming guests, my awkward transition for the week, next week we've got a really interesting project called Web 2 Project, which is basically a business-oriented project management system. So think something like Microsoft Project or whatever, but totally open source and web-based. So you have things like resource management and critical path analysis and all the kinds of things you normally find in a project management system. And I presume there's reporting and everything else in there. This sounds like a really interesting project. I think you can either host it yourself, or I think they also offer a hosting service for it. So you can actually just rent their machines and build your application using that. Just added to the schedule recently, Serenity for Android. That's a Plex media server client for tablets and Google TV devices. So that'll be interesting. I've played with Plex before. I don't use it as my lean back solution, but it is kind of handy. Occasionally I fired it up and played with modules and stuff and so on. And finally, the only other guest we have scheduled so far, blame me, I haven't been sending enough emails, is Ansible Works, which is a deployment software. It's kind of like Puppet or Chef, where you give it a formula and a list of things to do, and it goes out. I think it goes all the way down to bare metal and actually provisions a box, boots it using Pixie Boot or something, brings up the system, then loads all the rest of the software on it. Being used by some very, very large customers. So I'm looking forward to hearing how this is different from Puppet and Chef and Salt, Stack, and what else is there? CF Engine. There's probably about 20 more other ones in that particular area too. But Ansible Works, I heard once I announced this one, I got a lot of great feedback saying, "Oh, we've been using that for a while, and we really like it." So that's kind of cool. Speaking of upcoming guests and opening slots, I do have Q3 mostly open still. I'm sending out emails as quick as I can. I was supposed to do it last weekend. I got really distracted last weekend. You can go to our big spreadsheet at twit.tv/floss, linked from there. And you can see who's on the short list and how the open slots are being filled up. If you follow us on Floss Weekly on Google+, or at Floss Weekly on Identica and Twitter, you can also figure out when we're actually updating that list and finding out who our next guests are. If you have someone that you would like to have on the short list to be slotted almost instantly, no waiting. It's got plenty of slots coming up soon. No, in fact, 2 weeks from now, you could be on the show 2 weeks from now if you send me email today or tomorrow. Merlin@stonehenge.com. Have the project leader email me. Do not email me yourself with a suggestion. That just throws the whole monkey works off, and I'll never get to those. Those are way down at the bottom of the list now. We have a live chat. We took a couple questions from there. It's at live.twit.tv at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays, although we vary that slightly sometimes. So if you go to the spreadsheet, you'll find out all of our taping dates. You can follow me at Merlin, MERLYN, on Twitter and Identica. And I'm also Randall L. Schwartz on Google+, where I talk about a wide variety of subjects, open source, and my continued success at the low-carb, high-fat diet where I've lost 45 pounds in 6 months. By the way, I now am in my skinny pants. I am now down to a 32-30 pants, and I haven't worn that since high school. So this has definitely worked. I feel amazing. It's just been very, very cool. I think that's all the plugging I'm going to do for now. Dan, what you got going on?
I've got a very interesting plug today, actually. It's not quite a scoop, but it is an interesting announcement. Some people will know, I've mentioned it in over the years on Floss Weekly. I helped to organise an event in the UK called OggCamp, OGGCAMP. It is the largest open source event in the UK by quite some distance now. We had 400 to 500 people last year. Great talks. Obviously, there's a Barcamp element. There's all kinds of things going on. And we've just confirmed the dates for this year, which is going to be in October, or Ogtober, as I've rebranded it. So I did that. Yeah. And it's going to be... Yeah, it's going to be the 19th and 20th of October, which is obviously a weekend. So if you're in the UK and you can, or if you're not in the UK and you can travel during October, then have a look at oggcamp.org, oggcamp.org. There's just a splash page on there right now. But stay tuned, and I'll be giving you more updates as we go along. So make your travel plans, and also you can keep up with me at danlynch.org, where I'm blogging at the moment about getting back into software, some more software development stuff. I'm doing some PHP stuff at the moment, and other things as well. So you can keep up with me there as well.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thanks once again, 2 weeks in a row for joining this show, and obviously even more, right? If it would you do the show immediately before that too, that I was gone on?
No,
remember.
Simon did that one.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks again. That's the most important part. And anything else?
All these Brits sound the same. That's what, all these British people. We all sound the same. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. As always, it's a pleasure.
Very good, Dan. And thank you all for listening and staying tuned. And we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.